Welcome everyone to January's webinar, New Laws Landlords Need to Know for 2026. Thank you for attending. My name is Derek Harpel, coming in from K.I.G Property Management, joined by my brother and CEO, Jared Carpel. Jared, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And we have a very informative discussion today. We'll be having a very informative discussion today on new rules for 2026. Most of our clients are property owners in Los Angeles, California, which probably has the world record for most regulated city for when it comes to landlords. So, as you all know, there are always evolving laws that we need to be aware about. And so that's what today's session is just kind of going through some of the top ones that we feel really will impact owners' ability to make sure, of course, that they're compliant with any city, state, federal regulations, but also making sure that you're protecting your cash flow when it comes to these things, because there are going to be some laws in here that will directly impact that. So looking forward to today's discussion. As I mentioned, what we're going to be covering it, like I said, the new laws. We're going to also be diving into Los Angeles specific considerations. So a lot of these are going to be for California, but we're going to have some specific ones for Los Angeles. And as with all of our webinars that we have, we really try to give really practical compliance steps that you as an owner can do. And of course, if you need help, always feel free to reach out to us. And also what you should be doing right now. This is really important stuff that you can take action on. Anytime we have these webinars, we like to educate you, but we also like to tell folks like what they need to do, what actions need to occur. So let me get started. So AB 628, the mandatory appliances. Jared, you want to chat through this one?
Yeah, so Assembly Bill 628 passed by the state level, and now is requiring landlords to provide a working stove and a refrigerator. Now, a working stove wasn't new. That had always been, we had to provide that to our tenants. What's new, however, is the refrigerator component. And it applies to all new leases that have been extended or renewed or amended. And basically what we're saying, the legislature is saying, is that landlords have to provide fridges to tenants. Now, tenants can provide their own fridges if they have them. That's fine. And you want to make sure you document that in the lease. But landlords cannot require tenants to supply their own fridge. So we have to provide them. And if a tenant wants a refrigerator, they can request it, giving a 30 days written notice to the landlord. And just something to be aware of. It's going to increase our costs, our operating costs, especially if you have lots of units. If the tenant does provide their own refrigerator, however, the landlord is not responsible for any of the maintenance associated with that particular refrigerator. So really what you want to be doing as we move forward, kind of what landlords should be considering moving forward, is get an inventory of all the units and determine which units currently have stoves, which ones have refrigerators. You definitely want to budget for any sort of appliance repairs or replacements if in those units that are needed. You definitely want to be contacting a wholesale vendor, as we have done, and attempting to negotiate bulk appliance purchases. You definitely want to update any lease template language to ensure that you're compliant with the new refrigerator language. So in the past, our leases stated that landlord's not responsible for supplying a refrigerator, and if we do, we're not warranting those repairs. That language is fully unenforceable at this point in time as a result of the passing of AB 628. So you definitely want to remove any sort of clauses that require the tenants to supply their own stoves and refrigerators. And then you also want to establish some sort of a 30-day refrigerator request response. So when you do get those requests from the tenants and you have 30 days to do it, you just want to make sure you have a process in place that ensures that you are responding in a timely manner to those requests. And I would also mention that it's really important to document document the condition and the move-in of those appliances. Ultimately, that'll save any sort of disputes between you and your tenants.
Yeah, Jared, this is a really interesting law, and obviously we've known about this one coming down the pipe for quite some time, and we've advised all of our owners that they should be prepared for this, because this is not one of those just, hey, comply by a law, just sign off and submit something to the city or to the state. This is truly going to impact owners' cash flow, because if now they have to go and start purchasing refrigerators for folks and respond to them accordingly, and as you mentioned too, be prepared for maintenance on them. I mean, this really does impact owners pretty significantly. So I really like this list that we're just advising folks to do. Again, this is not something that you can just stand idly by with. This is something that folks are going to have to take action on. So I think great call. Just definitely start inventorying everything. My guess, and this is just a guess, if we're doing stoves and now we're doing refrigerators, who knows what's to come down the road, right? So
Well,
it's
I'll tell you what
oh,
the legislature right now is contemplating is they're contemplating HVAC units or AC
hmm,
units, right? So right now we are required to provide heat for our tenants, which okay, fair enough. But now certainly as the planet is getting warmer, especially here in Los Angeles, they're contemplating landlords being compelled to provide a cooling source in these units.
um,
So look out for that down the road. Something too, by the way, that just came to mind. It seems fairly obvious when I'm about to say it, but I think it's important to note that sometimes the cost of repair may very well exceed going out and just buying a new refrigerator.
absolutely.
So keep that in mind, and you want to make sure you have a good appliance repair guy that can be straightforward and tell you that. Thankfully, we have very good relationship with our vendors. They'll go out there and they'll say, you know what, guys, yeah, we can repair this, but you might be throwing good money after bad. So it might be better, more beneficial, cost effective to go out and just buy a brand new fridge. So make
Right.
sure you have good repair people that you can trust and that will be able to give you that professional opinion. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of money repairing something that it might be a lot cheaper to just simply to buy new.
As I sometimes say, don't be penny rich, dollar foolish. So absolutely great calls. All right, this one I know, AB 414 security deposit changes, a lot more regulatory influence here. Talk to us about this, that how tenants can choose electronic security deposit refunds on this.
So let's back up. Let's put some more context to this. Last year in 2024, actually, so a month ago, there were some changes around handling security deposits and what we now have to do upon move-ins and move-outs. And really, we talked about this in one of our last webinars discussions, where you have to document everything. You got to take photographs of the moving condition, photographs of the move-out condition, photographs of the condition of the property after it's been renovated. So it's really important. So what we're doing here is this is an extension of the security deposit laws and changes. And so when a tenant vacates, the tenants can choose to have their security deposit refunds, the balance after any sort of deductions, provided to them electronically. So usually that comes in the form of an ACH payment. So it's from our bank trust account directly to our tenants. Most tenants are gun shy and do not want to provide their personal banking information. However, the software that we utilize, we're not able to see their banking information. They just log into their tenant portal and they enter in their banking routing information, and we never see it on our end, but we're able to then make return security deposits via electronic. And the reason why I think that's helpful, and what would happen in the past oftentimes, is that we would send a security deposit check to the tenants, and the tenant may or may not have filled out the post office, U.S. Postal Service forwarding mail. And so a check might just be sitting in a mailbox, or worst case scenario, would have been stolen.
Mm,
So what we're trying to do here, and actually we have done this for many years now, as move towards electronic security deposit refunds. And then if you have multiple tenant in a particular unit, you have to ask the tenants how they like to split the security deposits. Traditionally, in the past, we would have one main tenant, and we would refund security deposits to that main tenant, and then the two tenants would have to negotiate amongst themselves that split. Well, now landlords were required to ask how we should split those refunds. And we have to split them accordingly, which thankfully our software allows us to do. Nothing surprising here. Another requirement for AB 414, excuse me, you have to have an itemized statement that sent by email if the tenant allows you to conduct business via email. Most of our tenants in our leases and in our rental applications, they acknowledge that they can do business with us via electronic email, in which case we can send them a itemized statement. Something we also do is we actually share a copy of the itemized statement in their tenant portal so they can log in and see it there as well.
yeah,
Something I mentioned earlier, joint refund checks are allowed when they're needed.
right.
And then again, this applies to all move outs starting as of 2026, so January 2026.
Got it. So this
So
is already in place now. We're already,
correct, Derek.
okay,
Correct.
got it.
Yeah.
So regardless of when the person moved in, so this is impacting move outs, and I just want to be clear because I had someone ask me this the other day. This isn't waiting just for when move-ins happen in 2026. This is starting from move outs in 2026. So people are already, in a sense, having to do this.
Correct.
Got
Correct.
it.
This law is in full force, and so what owners should do now. Let's talk about. We try to always provide advice. So we talk about the law and then how it affects owners. But okay, what should owner do in response to AB 414? You definitely want to update your move out procedures, and you want to offer electronic refund options. That's hands down. You want to be asking tenants at move in and move out how they want their refunds to be split. You want to make sure that you have, and we always have, as I mentioned earlier, our lease templates as well as our rental applications. The tenant signs off that they acknowledge that they're doing business with us through electronics, email, and they've authorized that. So you want to make sure that happens as well. And then you just want to make sure that whatever bookkeeping software that you're utilizing can handle electronic refunds and sort of joint split checks if necessary between multiple tenants.
This has me thinking, Jared, for a lot of mom and pop shops who are maybe doing a lot of this manually, um, they're going to need probably some support. Mom and pop owners who are trying to manage themselves. I mean, this really now really ups the game in terms of going virtual and having these digital processes that for many owners who come to us, they've been doing this a lot by hand.
Yeah.
And just kind of doing it, dare I say, in more analog sort of way. And this is now really, impressing upon people that they really probably need some professional support at some point, whether it's through a property management company or a bookkeeper, something like it really, gone are the days of pad and paper. And I had a call the other day where someone was doing a lot of stuff on pad and paper, and you just can't run business like that anymore.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's the thing. I mean, managing real estate is a professional business. And if you're going to do this part-time and run your dental practice on the full-time, and then you're a part-time landlord, I caution that truly because the laws are just becoming too strict and too stringent, and the enforcement mechanisms and the violation fees or the damages associated with non-compliance with some of these laws are pretty grave and pretty severe. So it really just it doesn't pay to go at this alone. In fact, we get a lot of clients, to your point earlier, Derek, that call us up and they're kind of in the, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. What do I do? Can you help me get out of it? We
yep.
prefer, I mean, yes, we can help you get out of it, but we prefer to be consulted earlier in the process to avoid having to help you get out of it. We'd rather be more proactive and help folks navigate it on the onset.
Absolutely. Agree. So related to this, let's talk deductions, pre-exit walkthrough deductions. I know this is something that we've got we have a team that really supports these efforts. But for folks who don't necessarily have a team, let's talk about, things that they can do as it relates to this new law.
Yeah, so what's really important is 2 weeks prior to, well, let me back up. A tenant will give a 30 days notice in writing to terminate the tenancy, right? But they can do so with 30 days notice, assuming they're not within an actual lease term. So a lease term has expired. They're on month to month, for example, they give 30 days notice to vacate. No problem. So by law, they are entitled to a 2-week pre walkthrough inspection, whereby we have to go in and speak with them, look through the property 2 weeks prior to them vacating, telling them, hey, this wall right here has excessive damage above normal wear and tear, and we think that we might have to charge you your security deposit. And what that does, it allows them an opportunity to cure the defect on their own. And that's the purpose of a pre-walkthrough inspection. The challenge with pre-walkthrough, the 2-week walkthrough inspection is that you might walk in and there's furniture still in the unit, or there's moving boxes stacked all the way to the ceiling, and you really cannot see the condition of the wall or the condition of the floor and the pee stained carpet from the dog. It's hard to do, but you're required to do so. So you want to make sure that on these pre-walkthrough inspections, your staff is going through and itemizing everything. And I mean everything from photographs, but also written documentation, line item of everything that potentially can be deducted from the security deposit. Okay. So if you have checklists, we're big on checklists when walkthroughs, you want to make sure those are updated. And basically, if it's not on your list, you probably can't be charged. So against the security deposit, you want to make sure that is done.
I think one thing we're very good at is documenting everything. Like you said, document. I think that comes back from you and I both having a legal background, but folks need to put it in writing, put it in a checklist, take pictures of everything. It's just so critical now because any mistake can really come back to haunt you later.
Yeah.
This I think so SB6. So moving on to SB 610, post-disaster cleanup obligations. This I wish wasn't something we had to talk about, but it seems like we're having a lot of disasters in LA, particularly last year's fires and so on. And this I think is probably part of that inspiration, or that's where this law comes from. But it really does place some duties now on owners when it comes to disaster cleanup. So after what's been a declared disaster, and it has to be declared disaster. What is it by the state, right?
Correct. And landlords, this is nothing new in the sense that landlords always had a duty to remediate. If there's any sort of major issues in their property, whether it be smoke or ash or mold, asbestos, water damage, landlords always had a duty to remediate and to ensure that the unit is maintained in a habitable manner. What this does, SB 610, is really addresses the circumstances involving, to your point, when the city or the state calls out a particular disaster, a declared disaster. And what we're doing here is, when that is happening, is basically there's a presumption after there's a declared disaster that a unit is uninhabitable, at least until it is cleared. And by cleared, we mean going in and removing the asbestos or the mold or the water damage by a professional company that comes in and then does the remediation, and also then tests for the quality of mold or the lack thereof after they've remediated. So they have to be cleared, right? And what's happening here is the state is putting on a little more guardrails. in what they have to do. And they have to make sure that the cleanup is completed within a reasonable time frame following the ending or the completion of the declared disaster. A reasonable time frame that varies. Generally speaking, 30 days is kind of the kind of rough estimate, although it certainly depends upon the extent of the actual disaster and the damage that was caused to the unit. So a reasonable time frame. So you can't just sit back on your laurels and wish that the mold or asbestos would go away. You actually have to take active measures to remediate any sort of damage that deems the unit to be uninhabitable.
And I want to quickly chat about the tenant protection. So tenants have a right to return at the same rent once that remediation is complete. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So that you cannot, what we saw during the fires, unfortunately, we saw landlords attempting to take advantage of it, do the remediation. They're like, oh my gosh, we spent $150,000 on remediation. So now we're going to bring our tenant back and we're going to increase the rent, right? In order to
Yeah,
recoup some
yeah.
of that lost money. No, that's illegal. And the other key thing too is that no rent is due or owed during any sort of state or local city mandatory mandated evacuation. So
Mhm.
if the city says, listen, you must vacate this particular area because it's in a fire risk zone, what have you, and you have to vacate for a week until the fire passes, for example, well, you as a tenant do not owe the landlord rent during that time.
Hmm, interesting. Um, yeah, I want to continue some of these, and I think you kind of covered these, but this really applies to disasters with a state or federal emergency declaration. I know people who say, "Oh my God, I'm having a disaster over here." We don't mean disaster in a colloquial sense. We literally mean that it has to be a disaster declared by the state or federal government. Landlords, as we've talked about, and of course, we always do, must address those health and safety hazards, you know, at the beginning. This is not necessarily a time to redo some cabinets. You really want to make sure you're addressing those health and safety hazards immediately so it's safe for your tenants to return. And then written notices is going to be required when remediation is completed. So landlords are going to be required to let tenants know when the remediation is complete, when it's safe for them to enter. So make sure you have some sort of process for doing so.
And
Um,
not only do they have to give written notice to the tenant that's been completed, but the tenants may ask for it, and you would be required to provide any sort of environmental or clearing reports that's
right.
been cleared. Oh, yeah, there
Absolutely.
it is right there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, and prepaid rent must be refunded or credit for periods where the tenants cannot legally occupy. We talked about that a second ago. So yeah, this is, unfortunately something that's become a reality that I think more and more landlords, particularly last year, were talking with us about, and now it's become law. There are anti-retaliation protections, so evictions following failure to remediate may be presumed unlawful. Any eviction that follows any failure to remediate, is now going to be considered completely unlawful. So owners do need to know that there are some real strict laws here. This may not apply to some of our smaller or some of our folks, mom and pop shops who don't provide internet, but for some of our larger clients who have maybe bulk internet options, AB 1414, basically internet fee out. You want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so in some of our larger complexes that have a lot of amenities-based buildings, landlords will provide internet for tenants, and which is, I think, a lovely value add amenity. However, now underneath AB 1414, the tenants have a right to decline, to not move forward, to basically opt out of any sort of bundled internet or tech service fees that might be attributed and passed on to the tenant. So basically, internet service cannot become a condition of the tenancy. The only way you can move in and sign this lease is if you sign up for this internet access. That's no longer can happen. So any sort of optional service has to be clearly disclosed, and it's got to be voluntary. You cannot force a tenant to take on these additional fees. Okay. So you want to make sure you're updating your lease disclosures. You're separating out these optional services from the actual rent charges. We have some owners that go ahead and charge tenants for have some amenities for car washing or for
Mhm.
Amazon lockers, and they'll charge a fee. None of all that has to be disclosed now, and it has to be charged separate from the rent. It cannot be bundled in. Okay. And you want to make sure that your staff or you, if you're a mom and pop, understand these opt-in and opt-out rules. It's really, really critically important at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Great actions to take. Make sure you're going through all these things, your leases, and if you do have a staff of people, make sure that they all understand what those opt-in and opt-out rules are, because you certainly don't want to be in violation of anything like this.
Yep.
This one was an interesting one too. So I think, it seems in our polarized political climate, Jared, we seem to have more and more government shutdowns. So naturally, we have more laws related to government shutdown. So what a testament to the situation where we've got laws related to natural disasters. Now we have laws related to government shutdowns. But AB 246, talk to us about how government shutdowns impact tenants' ability to pay and what that means for landlords if, for example, tenants are getting paid through some sort of government supply check.
Yeah, so this is kind of the last law, big law that we'll talk about in this call that's affecting 2026 in landlord tenant laws. This one, AB 246, really only applies to tenants who rely upon receiving Social Security, SSI, or SSDI payments from the federal government. And basically, what it's saying here is that if the federal government shuts down and the issuance of that money to our tenants is delayed as a result of the government shutdown, we cannot evict. There's
Right.
basically a pause on any sort of eviction during government shutdown where our tenants are failing to pay their rent because they failed to obtain money through the federal government because they are a Social Security beneficiary. Something to note, however, that the rent is not forgiven. Okay, so if there's missed rent because of the government shutdown, it must be repaid once the benefits from the federal government are resumed, usually within 14 days. But any sort of eviction activity or initiation against that particular tenant is basically stayed as a result of any sort of government shutdown.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. All right, so we're kind of at the top of the hour here, or top of the half hour, I should say. 2026 compliant checklist. Landlords, this is what you should be doing now. So make sure, as we talked about earlier, check your appliances. Make sure you have an appliance compliance review. How did I write that? Appliance compliance review.
Client review. Nice.
Who would write such a thing? What moron wrote this? All right, so an appliance compliance review. That's gonna stick. Make sure you're aware of all of your appliances, and again, just keep that checklist that we talked about earlier on as it relates to now having to supply refrigerators to potential tenants. Make sure you're doing all the lease language updates that we talked about regarding particularly the opt-in, opt-out for some of those services like internet. You talked about, Jared, about Amazon delivery boxes or delivery rooms, and also refrigerators, as we talked about as well. Make sure that you have a very thorough deposit handling procedure. This cannot be overstated enough. Make sure that you have processes in place, that you're documenting everything. Write it down, take pictures, make videos, whatever you need to do to make sure that you are handling these move outs. And again, these move outs are all for the compliance checklist is starting for move-outs that are occurring in 2026. Doesn't matter when the lease started. It's all for move-outs in 2026. Make sure you have any internet fee disclosures, things that we just talked about, any service that you're providing. Make sure you have that separated as an opt-in or an opt-out in any of your lease agreements. Make sure, again, that you have your eviction process reviewed. Evictions continue to be a plague for owners, so make sure that you've got your process under wraps and make sure it's in compliance with all 2026 new laws and regulations. And just in general, make sure that your LA registration and local rule, make sure all those are in check. Of course, that didn't change in 2026. That's just something that folks will need to continue to do. So, Jared, any final words for anyone for as we move on to the new year?
No, I think we covered it all. I think hope everybody remains safe and healthy in this new year. And of course, if you're struggling to manage tenant relations and vendors and your property, and you would like for us to consider helping you out, we'd be delighted to speak with you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jared. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Again, if you need any support, feel free to give us a call, 888-270-4452, or email us at sales@KIGcapital.com. Thank you for attending. We'll look forward to seeing you all in February. Have a wonderful start of 2026, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.